Namaste. On this episode of The Indian Abroad, we're talking about something that's making headlines literally every single day. And those are executive orders signed by President Donald Trump. But these orders are not just shaping America's future, but also influencing global dynamics. So what exactly is an executive order? Can President Trump bypass Congress completely? And what happens when he signs an executive order? Let's take a closer look. An executive order is a rule or directive issued by the President of the United States to manage operations within the federal government. Crucially, the President does not need approval from Congress here, that is the House of Representatives and the Senate, to issue one. That's why executive orders are often used to act quickly, especially when lawmakers are gridlocked or when they're divided. Since being sworn into office in January 2025, President Trump has signed over 80 executive orders. This is the highest number in a president's first 3 months in 4 decades. Many of these are focused on immigration, border security, and tightening visa rules, particularly targeting illegal crossings at the southern U.S. border. Once an executive order is signed, it is published in the U.S. Federal Register. This is the official government journal that documents all administrative actions in the U.S. At that point, the executive order becomes legally binding, and federal agencies are asked to enforce it. For example, one of President Trump's recent orders temporarily suspended the entry of certain non-citizens at the southern border, citing an overwhelming surge in illegal crossings that posed a threat to national security, as well as strained the capacity of immigration systems. But executive orders don't go unchallenged. If a group or organization believes that an executive order is unconstitutional, they can take that issue to federal court. The judiciary then decides whether to uphold, block, or revise that order. Additionally, Congress has indirect power. Although lawmakers can't block an executive order outright, they can pass new legislation to override or amend it, although that process is much slower and often highly politicized. Another key point here, executive orders don't last forever. Future presidents can reverse or revoke previous orders, and this is a common practice. For example, when President Joe Biden took office in 2021, he rolled back several of Trump's earlier orders on immigration, environmental policy, as well as healthcare. Now, in his second term, Trump is undoing many of Biden's executive actions and aggressively advancing his own agenda through the same method. It is important to understand that executive orders do not create new laws. Only Congress has the power to do that. But executive orders can influence how existing laws are interpreted as well as enforced. This gives the president substantial control over the direction of policy, especially in times of crisis or when immediate action is required. Throughout American history, presidents have relied on executive orders to address urgent issues. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, an executive order that declared enslaved people in Confederate states to be free. While it didn't end slavery outright, it laid the groundwork for the 13th Amendment. In the 20th century, President Franklin D. Roosevelt used executive orders extensively to stabilize the U.S. economy during the Great Depression, including one controversial order that required all Americans to surrender their private gold holdings. During the Civil Rights Movement, President Eisenhower and Kennedy also issued orders to integrate schools and enforce equal protection under the law. In modern times, presidents have used executive orders to tackle everything from climate change and gun violence to trade regulations and pandemic responses. President Trump, during both his terms, has leaned heavily on this executive tool to bypass partisan gridlock and swiftly implement policy, especially in areas like border control, trade restrictions, and foreign policy. Of course, every executive order has consequences, some intended, others not. They can change how the U.S. is viewed globally, affect markets, alter diplomatic relations, and shift immigration patterns. For citizens of other countries, especially those seeking to visit, study, or work in the U.S., executive orders can have very real personal impacts. The takeaway here? Executive orders are not just internal U.S. government tools. They have global effects. And with the 2025 Trump presidency in full swing, these orders are a key part of how the U.S. is navigating a complex and rapidly changing world. For NDTV, this is Priyanka Deo signing off. Namaste.